Camping in an RV is supposed to be safe. That's the appeal, isn't it? A home away from home, four walls and a roof, a controlled environment even in the middle of nowhere. It's why people choose it over a flimsy tent, because steel doors and locked windows provide a sense of security, a barrier between what's outside and what's in. But the illusion of safety is just that, an illusion. It relies on the idea that danger will always come with a warning, that if something is out there, you'll hear the snap of a twig, the rustling of undergrowth, the unmistakable presence of something moving where nothing should be. But what if that warning never comes? What if the moment you realize something is wrong, it's already inside? The woods are vast, ancient, and indifferent. They don't care who enters, who leaves, or who never does. The deeper you go, the easier it is to forget how small you are, how easily something could be watching without you ever knowing. We think of the wilderness as empty space, as if miles of trees and earth create a void where nothing happens unless we bring it with us. But there are places where the air is thick with something unspoken, where even the most experienced campers feel it, the weight of being unwelcome, of being watched. Some places don't want visitors, and some things never left. It always starts the same way. A perfect location, a weekend away, the promise of peace and quiet. The kind of quiet that lulls you into a false sense of comfort. The kind of quiet that makes you believe you're alone, until you start noticing things, little things. Maybe it's the way the wind dies suddenly, leaving the air unnaturally still. Maybe it's how the trees seem closer than before, pressing in just enough to make you wonder if it's always been that way. Maybe it's the way your own footsteps seem to echo too loudly, like the ground is waiting to swallow the sound whole. And then there are the sounds you can't explain. A tapping, faint, rhythmic, too soft to be the wind, too deliberate to be an accident. A sound so small, so insignificant at first, that you tell yourself it's nothing, just the RV settling, just the branches shifting, just the forest existing as it always has. But then, it happens again. Closer. This is how it begins for most people. Dismissal, rationalization, a small, creeping feeling that is brushed aside, explained away, until the explanations no longer make sense, until the taps turn to knocks, until the knocks become something else. There is a moment, a single moment, when the body recognizes what the mind refuses to accept. A change in the air. A shift so subtle it doesn't register as fear, not yet, but something inside you knows. Something isn't right. You tell yourself it's paranoia, that you're letting your imagination run wild, that if you just close your eyes, sleep will come, and morning will bring normalcy. But the night stretches long, and sleep never comes easily when you're listening. Listening for the next sound. Because the moment you stop telling yourself it's nothing, it becomes something. Tonight, we step into the story of someone who thought they were prepared. Someone who believed that safety was a matter of preparation, that if they planned carefully enough, if they followed all the rules, they could keep the unknown at bay. But the unknown doesn't follow rules. It doesn't need an invitation. These are real accounts. True events, told exactly as they happened. And as you listen, ask yourself, what would you do if it happened to you? He arrived just before sundown. The perfect spot, secluded, quiet, untouched. Exactly what he wanted. The kind of place where the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the distant chorus of crickets. No screaming children, no noisy neighbors, no distractions. Just him, the open sky, and the whisper of the wind through the trees. He had been camping his whole life, knew the rules, Arrive before dark, check your surroundings, always lock the doors. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to scare easily. But there was something about this place, something that made him pause. Maybe it was the way the trees loomed too close, their jagged branches reaching like skeletal fingers against the fading light. Maybe it was the unnatural stillness, the way the wind barely stirred the leaves, as if even nature was holding its breath. Or maybe it was just exhaustion. He shook it off. He had driven for hours to get here, to escape the noise of the city, the constant hum of everyday life. This was his time to unwind, to breathe. He set up his fire, cooked a simple meal, let the warmth of the flames chase away the creeping cold. With a beer in hand, he settled into his chair, stretching his legs, finally allowing himself to relax. The night stretched on, stars scattered like shattered glass across the sky. The fire flickered, casting long shadows against the surrounding trees, shadows that moved with the wind. At least, that's what he told himself. Then came the first sound. Software. Faint. A rustling just beyond the fire's glow. He barely reacted. Probably a raccoon, maybe a deer. The woods were full of life. That was part of the experience. But then it came again. A little closer. A little too deliberate. Not the aimless movements of an animal foraging for food. Not the wind shifting the undergrowth. Something slower, purposeful. He straightened in his chair, eyes narrowing into the darkness. Nothing. Just trees, unmoving and indifferent. The fire crackled beside him, a steady reminder that he was still here, still safe. He forced himself to look away, to take another sip of his beer, to let his shoulders loosen. And then he saw it. A shape, just at the edge of the firelight. At first, he thought it was a trick of the flames, the way the light danced and twisted against the trees. But as his eyes adjusted, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't the fire. It was a figure, standing motionless, watching. The flames flickered, stretching the shadow long, distorting it, but there was no mistaking what he was seeing. Someone, or something, was there. A surge of adrenaline snapped through him, but he forced himself to stay still, to think. A lost hiker? A hunter? Someone who had wandered too far and ended up near his camp? His voice felt thick in his throat when he finally spoke. "Hey, you okay out there?" Silence. The figure didn't move, didn't shift, didn't react, just stood there at the edge of the trees where the light barely touched. His pulse pounded against his ribs. A strange, creeping sensation crawled along his skin. Every instinct told him that this wasn't right, that something was wrong. The logical part of his mind fought against the rising fear. Maybe it was just someone messing with him, a prank, a joke. But then, just as he was about to call out again, it moved. Not a step forward, not a step back, just shifted. Like a flicker in reality. Like a momentary glitch. 1 second it was there, the next, gone. The breath hitched in his throat, his body locked up, rigid and unblinking, scanning the darkness. Nothing. The fire crackled beside him, the only sound breaking the silence. The trees stood still, the night unchanged. It was as if the figure had never been there at all. His hands clenched into fists, his breath coming short, sharp. He reached for the flashlight beside his chair, flicked it on, and aimed it at the spot where the figure had stood. Empty. His heart thudded against his ribs. He swept the beam back and forth, searching for movement, for anything that would explain what he had just seen. But there was nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. And then, another sound. Behind him. Close. He spun, the flashlight beam cutting through the black, sweeping wildly. Nothing. The firelight cast long, flickering shadows, stretching them unnaturally. The air felt wrong now. He could feel it, something pressing in, heavy and silent. He swallowed hard. He needed to think, needed to get inside the RV. Lock the doors. Slowly, he backed toward the vehicle, keeping the light steady, his breath shallow. He fumbled for the door handle, fingers slick with sweat. The second he touched it, something in the woods moved. Fast. A blur of shadow. His pulse slammed into overdrive. He threw the door open, practically diving inside, slamming it shut behind him. Silence. Nothing but the sound of his own ragged breathing. He locked the doors, double-checked the windows. His mind raced, replaying what he had seen, what he thought he had seen. A trick of the light. Had to be. Exhaustion playing games with his head. But then, as he sat there, trying to calm himself, the RV shifted. The slightest creak, like weight against the metal, like something pressing against the side. His breath hitched, and then, a knock. Slow, deliberate. Once, twice. He didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, silence. He stayed awake the entire night, listening, waiting. But the knocks never came again. By sunrise, he packed up and left without looking back. He never camped alone again. Some things in the woods don't want to be seen. And when they are, they make sure you never forget. He had heard the stories before. The kind of stories that cling to the land, passed down from those who understand it best. The Lakota people had spoken of it for generations. Warnings whispered in the safety of firelight, told with a gravity that made it clear these were not mere legends. There were things in these lands. Things older than time. Things that did not take kindly to outsiders. He hadn't believed it. Not at first. He was an experienced hiker, drawn to the isolation of the Pine Ridge Reservation, its untouched beauty, its raw, unfiltered wilderness. He had come seeking solitude, the kind only found in places where the modern world had not yet stretched its fingers. But Pine Ridge was different. It was ancient. It felt ancient. Even in daylight, there was something about the place that pressed against the edges of his mind, something heavy in the air, unseen but undeniable. He brushed it off. It was just the vastness, the emptiness, playing tricks on him. But then came the warning. An elder, seated outside a small trading post, had watched him with eyes like polished stone, unreadable and knowing. "You shouldn't be out there alone," the elder had said. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something firm. The hiker had smiled politely, assuring the man he was prepared, that he had camped in places far more remote. The elder shook his head. "You don't understand. The land remembers, and there are things here that don't forget." The warning stayed with him long after he left the trading post, but he hadn't turned back. He had already set his sights on the deep woods ahead. He wanted the quiet. He would soon regret that decision. The first night was uneventful. A small fire, a simple meal, the distant call of coyotes echoing across the hills. But there was something strange about the silence between those calls. It wasn't the peaceful quiet he was used to in the wilderness. It was too thick, too deliberate, like something was waiting. He slept lightly, every sound pulling him back to the edge of wakefulness. The rustling of the wind through the dry grass, the distant hoot of an owl. And then, a new sound. Low, subtle, like breathing. Deep, slow. Just outside his tent. His eyes snapped open, heart hammering. He held his breath, listening, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But then he heard it again, a long, measured inhale, Then an exhale. It was close. Too close. He stayed frozen, body rigid, waiting for something, anything to happen. But after a few agonizing minutes, the breathing stopped, and the night went silent. Not even the coyotes called after that. The next day, he convinced himself it had been a dream, that the wind had played tricks on his half-conscious mind. But the feeling, that oppressive weight in the air, lingered. He continued his hike, following an unmarked trail deep into the hills. The sun was high, but the shadows felt longer than they should have been. The trees loomed taller, their gnarled branches twisting in unnatural angles. And then he heard it, the growl, low, rumbling, a sound that did not belong to any animal he had ever encountered. He stopped, ears straining. Nothing. Just wind. Then, another growl. Closer. A deep vibration, so guttural it felt as if the earth itself had rumbled beneath him. His pulse quickened. He scanned the trees, the ridgeline, the tall grass swaying in the breeze. Nothing moved, but he could feel it. Something was there, watching, following. He quickened his pace, his breathing controlled but shallow, resisting the urge to run. Running in the wilderness was dangerous. Running meant panic, and panic got people killed. But then came the footsteps, not his own. Behind him, heavy, deliberate, mirroring his every move. He spun around, flashlight raised, eyes darting across the landscape. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows. Nothing. But the moment he turned back toward the trail, a branch snapped, right behind him. His breath came fast and uneven now. He forced himself to move, walking faster, heart pounding in his throat. The footsteps followed, matching his every movement. Then, just ahead, a break in the trees, a clearing. If he could just reach it, he could get a better view, see whatever was following him. He pushed forward, stepping into the open space. And then he saw it. At the far end of the clearing, standing unnaturally still. It wasn't human, tall, gaunt, its limbs too long, its body stretched in unnatural proportions, and its eyes, glowing. Not like the reflective shine of an animal's in the dark, but something else, something unnatural, something wrong. The hiker froze. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. Then it tilted its head, a slow, unnatural motion, and it smiled. A wide, gaping expression that stretched far beyond the limits of a human face. The air turned thick, suffocating. The world around him felt like it was closing in, the sky pressing downward. And then, the screech. A sound so inhuman, so wrong, that it shattered every rational thought in his mind. His body moved before he could think. He turned and ran. The footsteps behind him weren't slow anymore. They were fast, too fast. Something crashed through the trees, gaining on him, closing the distance. He sprinted, lungs burning, legs screaming. His campsite was still miles away. He would never make it. But then, silence. The footsteps stopped. The air around him changed, the pressure lifting just slightly. He slowed, chest heaving, daring to glance behind him. Nothing. The clearing was empty, but he knew it was still there, watching, waiting. He never finished his hike, never returned to Pine Ridge. The land remembers. And some things never forget. Yosemite National Park. A place of breathtaking beauty, of towering cliffs and endless forests. A place where millions of visitors come each year to escape the noise of the modern world, to immerse themselves in the wilderness. But some never return. There are stories that slip through the cracks of official reports. Stories that exist only in whispers, passed between rangers, locals, and those who have spent enough time in these woods to know something isn't right. Some places do not want to be explored, and some people simply vanish. The disappearances began in the summer of 1998. Hikers, campers, experienced outdoorsmen, all vanishing without a trace, their campsites left undisturbed, their belongings untouched. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just gone. One by one, they disappeared. And to this day, not a single body has ever been found. It was August 12, 1998, when the first report came in. A solo camper named Daniel Reeves, an experienced hiker, well-versed in survival. He had called his sister from a payphone before heading into the backcountry, promising to be back in 4 days. He was never seen again. When rangers found his campsite a week later, nothing was out of place. His gear was still neatly packed, his food supply untouched, his boots sitting just outside his tent as if he had taken them off for the night and never put them back on. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. His case was disturbing, but not entirely unheard of. People go missing in national parks all the time. But then, just 2 weeks later, another report came in, and this time, it was worse. August 28th, 3 hikers, Mark and Lisa Holland, along with their friend Brian Keller. They had set out for a 5-day trek, following one of Yosemite's less-traveled trails. They never came back. When search and rescue found their camp, it was as if they had stepped away for just a moment. Backpacks still zipped up, sleeping bags neatly laid out, a pot of water sitting on the campfire ring as if someone had been about to boil it. But they were gone. And again, no signs of struggle, no signs of anything wrong, except, for one thing, footprints. Not theirs. Something else. They weren't normal footprints, not like those left by a person or a bear. They were wrong. Too long, too deep. And the spacing, it didn't make sense. As if whatever had made them was walking on limbs far taller than any human. The search team followed the prints as far as they could, but after 50 yards, they simply stopped. No return path, no indication of where whoever or whatever had left them had gone. Just an empty trail, leading nowhere. There were theories, of course. People said they got lost, that they wandered off trail, fell, succumbed to the elements. But that didn't explain why their campsites were untouched. It didn't explain why no bodies were ever found. And it didn't explain what one witness saw just days later. It was late, maybe 1 in the morning. I was camping about 5 miles from where they found that abandoned site. I couldn't sleep, kept feeling like something was off. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not animal, not human, something else. I turned off my lantern, just sat there, listening. And that's when I saw it. It was standing between the trees, tall, too tall. Its limbs were long, almost stretched, its body impossibly thin. But it was the way it stood that sent ice through his veins. Still, unmoving, waiting. And the eyes, they weren't reflective, like an animal's. They weren't glowing from the light of the moon. They were the light, 2 burning orbs fixed on him, unblinking. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it moved. Not forward, not backward. Just sideways, flickering between the trees like a shadow shifting in the wind. Then it was gone. The hiker didn't stay. He left everything, his tent, his gear, and ran. By sunrise, he was gone, and he never returned. They never found the missing hikers. They never explained the footprints, and whatever that witness saw, it was never seen again. But those who venture deep into Yosemite still report strange things. The sound of footsteps where no one walks. The feeling of being watched when no one is there. And sometimes, just sometimes, a glimpse of something standing in the trees, watching, waiting. Some places do not want to be explored, and some people simply vanish. There are stories that never make the news, stories buried beneath layers of red tape, hidden behind closed doors, erased from official records, stories of operations carried out in the dead of night, missions that were never meant to be remembered. This is one of those stories. A man, whose real name cannot be disclosed, came forward after years of silence. A former operative. A soldier tasked with something that should not have existed. His mission was simple: eliminate them. Creatures that were never supposed to be real, but the government knew they were, and they were afraid. They called us containment teams, said we were just there to clean up classified threats. But we knew. We all knew. We weren't dealing with foreign operatives. We weren't dealing with wild animals. We were dealing with something else. Something older, something smarter, and we had no idea what we were up against. It was supposed to be a routine sweep. They had been briefed on the situation: local disappearances, unexplainable animal deaths, reports of something moving in the forest at night. They were told it was just another containment job, but nothing about it was normal. Not the silence, not the air, thick with something wrong, and not the way the trees seemed to press in around them, as if the forest itself was trying to keep them inside. It started with the noises. Clicks, whispers, like something imitating human speech, but wrong. We thought it was interference at first, until the voices started repeating our words back to us, word for word, same tone, same cadence, like an echo. Then we saw them. They weren't animals. They weren't people. Their limbs were too long, their movements too fast, their eyes glowing, not from the reflection of their night vision goggles, but from something within. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they attacked. They didn't scream, they didn't struggle, they just vanished. 1 second, they were there, the next, gone. Then the realization hit them. These things, they weren't running from the gunfire. They were herding them, pushing them into position, leading them exactly where they wanted them to go. And the team had walked right into the trap. I saw it, right before extraction, 7 feet tall, maybe more, skin, stretched too thin, like it wasn't made to fit its frame. It grinned at me, not like an animal baring its teeth, not like a person. It wanted me to see it. They called for an airstrike, burned the entire sector to the ground. Official report said it was to eliminate a biohazard threat. But there was no trace of the team members who had disappeared. No bodies, no gear, nothing, as if they had never been there at all. I put in for retirement the next day. I don't know how many of these missions happened. I don't know how many teams never came back. But I know one thing. The government isn't hunting these things. They're trying to contain them. Because they know, just like we did, you can't kill what doesn't belong to this world. Solitude. That's what he wanted. Miles away from civilization. Just him, the open road, and the silence of the Montana wilderness. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape. A weekend of quiet reflection, of disconnecting from the world. But solitude is not always empty, and silence is not always safe. What he experienced that night was something no amount of logic could explain, something that waited in the darkness, something that wanted him alone. The first few hours were exactly what he had hoped for. No distractions, no noise. Just the hum of the wind against the trees and the soft crackling of his small campfire. But as night settled in, something changed. The air felt different. He couldn't explain it, but the weight of the silence had shifted. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was expectant. He brushed it off, probably just the wind, maybe an animal. He was in the wilderness after all. But then, around midnight, the noises started again. Only this time, they were closer. It wasn't the sound itself that made his skin crawl. It was the feeling that came with it. A deep, primal instinct whispering in the back of his mind, "You are not alone." The howls stopped, but the night did not return to silence. Now there was something new. A sound that sent ice through his veins, scratching, slow, deliberate, against the walls of the RV. His first thought was a bear, maybe a mountain lion, but something about it felt off. It wasn't frantic, like an animal trying to get in. It was testing the surface, feeling it, as if it knew he was inside. He didn't see it at first, not really. It was just a shape, barely visible against the night. Tall, too tall. A figure standing just at the edge of the clearing, its body warped, distorted, as if the shadows themselves refused to hold its form. And then, it moved. Ben's breath hitched. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run. But to where? He was miles from the nearest town. His only shelter was the thin metal walls of his RV. And then, the power flickered. And that's when the RV began to shake, violently, like something massive had slammed into it. But there was no impact, no sound of anything hitting the vehicle. It was as if the air itself had clenched around it, twisting, pulling. He couldn't stay. He wouldn't stay. Fumbling with his keys, he turned the ignition. The engine sputtered, choked, wouldn't start. And then, a whisper. "Come out." And then, for the first time, it knocks. Once, twice. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the thin metal door. And Ben understands something deep in his bones. This thing, whatever it is, knows he's afraid, and it likes that. He didn't sleep, didn't move, just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. And when the sun finally broke through the trees, it was gone. No footprints, no sign that anything had been there at all. But Ben knew something had, and it had wanted him to know. He never returned to that spot, never told anyone where it was, because deep down, he knew it was still there, waiting, for the next person to come looking for solitude, for the next person to be alone. There are places in this country where time stands still, places untouched by modern maps, places where the deeper you go, the less the rules of the world seem to apply. Missouri's backwoods is one of those places. For one traveler who we'll call Daniel, getting lost out here should have been nothing more than a frustrating detour. But what he found deep in those woods, what found him, was something no one should ever have to see. Something that wasn't supposed to be seen. He had planned a simple road trip. A week of quiet drives, exploring rural America, seeing places most people never thought twice about. But the back roads of Missouri weren't like the highways he was used to. They twisted. They narrowed. And, as the sun dipped below the treetops, the road seemed to change, as if leading him deeper, pulling him further from any hope of finding his way back. It was just past twilight when he saw it. At first, he thought it was an animal, a shape, just off the road, crouched low, unmoving. His headlights swept past it, but in that split second he caught too much detail. It wasn't an animal, it was a person, or at least, it looked like one. A sane man would have turned around. A smart man would have hit the gas and never looked back. But Daniel, tired, lost, and running low on fuel, made the mistake of stopping. Then, without warning, it twitched. Not a normal movement, not a shiver, not a reflex. A sudden, unnatural jerk, like a marionette on broken strings. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to drive. But before he could, something else moved in the trees. A shape. No, many shapes. They weren't just watching him. They were studying him, testing how close they could get before he ran. The road behind him twisted into darkness. The road ahead was worse, but he didn't care. He floored it. He drove for miles, never looking back, never slowing down. By the time he saw the first signs of civilization, his hands were numb from gripping the wheel. He stopped at the first gas station he found. And when he told the attendant what he had seen, the man didn't ask where. He just shook his head and said 6 simple words. "You shouldn't have gone out there." He went to the police, filed a report. They dismissed it, told him it was moonshiners, maybe drug runners, probably just backwoods people who didn't take kindly to strangers. But when he asked about the way they moved, the way they watched him, the officer's expression changed, and instead of answering, he just told Daniel something he never forgot. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. Some people aren't meant to be found. He never went back. He never took another back road, never drove through the woods alone again. Because whatever he saw out there saw him too. And some things don't forget. Some cases never close. Some reports collect dust, filed away in locked cabinets, labeled unexplained. And some stories, no matter how many times you try to forget them, stay with you. This is one of those stories. It comes from a veteran police officer in a quiet Wisconsin town. A man who had seen everything until the night he saw something that shouldn't exist. Something that turned a routine call into a nightmare. It started with a call, a 911 report from a frantic woman. She lived alone, a few miles outside of town. Said she'd seen something, standing in her yard, watching her. Dispatch told her to stay inside. Mike was already in the area, just a few minutes away. He expected a trespasser, maybe a drunk. He was wrong. He radioed in, stepped out of his car, and approached the house. The woman met him at the door, shaking, said the thing had been out there for over an hour, said it didn't move, didn't react, just stared. Mike scanned the yard with his flashlight. Nothing, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there, but as he turned to reassure the woman, her face went pale. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking past him, at something behind him. He didn't see it at first, not until he aimed his light toward the trees, and there it was, standing at the very edge of the woods, tall, thin, wrong. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its limbs too long. And the worst part? It wasn't facing him. It was turned sideways, its body rigid, its head twisted almost completely backward as it watched him. Mike reached for his radio, but before he could speak, everything went black. The next thing he knew, he was back in his squad car, sitting in the driver's seat, hand gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles ached. His radio crackled. Dispatch was calling his name. 30 minutes had passed, but to him, it had only been seconds. He didn't remember getting back into the car, didn't remember anything after seeing it. And the woman? When he looked back at the house, her porch light was off, the door was closed, and she never called 911 again. I've seen a lot of things in my career, but that night, that was the only time I felt like something was looking at me, like I was prey. The case remains open. No footprints, no evidence, just a corrupted dash cam file. When you see something that isn't supposed to be there, don't look too long, because sometimes it looks back. National parks are supposed to be safe, beautiful, serene, a place where people come to escape the noise of the modern world. But some who work in these places know better, and some parks, they hold secrets the public isn't meant to know. This is the story of a former park ranger from Cuyahoga Valley, Ohio, who spent years watching over its trails and finally saw something that made him walk away forever. He doesn't want to give his real name. He doesn't want attention. He just wants to tell the truth. Because, as he puts it, nobody listens until it's too late. He had worked in the park for over a decade, guided lost hikers back to safety, helped families find missing kids who wandered off the trails. But the missing people, they weren't what scared him. It was who or what was taking them. The first time he heard the stories, he dismissed them. Locals talked about the figures in the trees, dark shapes spotted at dusk, too tall, too still. They said hikers would see them from the corner of their eye, just a flicker of movement in the distance. But when they turned to look, nothing was there. It wasn't until the first disappearance that he started paying attention. A young man, mid-20s, experienced hiker, knew the trails well, went for a solo trek on a cloudy afternoon, never came back. The search lasted weeks. They found his tent, his backpack, even his phone, lying neatly on the trail, battery drained, screen cracked. But no footprints, no signs of struggle, just gone. The second disappearance? A mother and daughter. They were only a mile from their car. The father turned around for 1 minute, just long enough to tie his shoe. When he looked back, they were gone. He still remembers the father's face, still hears his voice screaming their names, still hears the silence that answered back. The ranger stopped hiking alone after that, stopped taking the deep trails, and after dark, he never left the station, because sometimes, when the sun set, he felt something watching from the woods, something that wasn't supposed to be there. The final straw came on a cold November evening, a routine patrol, just him, his flashlight, and the quiet of the forest. Then, his radio crackled. A voice, distant, garbled, barely understandable. It wasn't from dispatch. It wasn't from another ranger. It was his own voice. He turned back toward the station, didn't run, didn't stop, just walked, fast, steady, because he knew something was walking with him. He made it inside, locked the door, radioed for backup, and when he looked out the window, there was a shape, standing just beyond the tree line, tall, thin, watching. The next morning, he quit, turned in his badge, left without saying goodbye, because he knew if he stayed any longer one night, he wouldn't make it back. He never went back, and if you ever find yourself hiking in Cuyahoga Valley, stick to the main trails, stay out of the woods after dark, and if you hear your own voice on the radio, don't follow it. The wilderness has always held its secrets, remote, isolated, unforgiving. Some say the further you go, the more you risk finding something that doesn't want to be found. And in the depths of Colorado's backcountry, people are disappearing, without a trace, without an answer, just a void, swallowing them whole. And those who do come back, they return with stories that don't make sense, stories no one believes. But the truth is there, carved into the trees, whispering in the wind, waiting in the dark. And those who venture too deep never return the same. A group of friends, a remote campsite. They just wanted a weekend away. 4 friends, experienced campers, no cell service, no crowds, just miles and miles of untouched wilderness. They set up camp near a river, deep inside one of Colorado's lesser-known forests. They were alone. At least, they thought they were. Carvings in trees and unnatural remains. The first sign that something was wrong came at dusk. One of the campers, Mark, wandered a little off-trail to gather firewood, and that's when he saw it. A tree, its bark stripped away in long, deep gouges. Not from an animal, not from a tool. The carvings were symbols. He called the others over. They joked about it at first, some weird backwoods graffiti maybe, but as they moved through the trees, they found more carvings, and something else. Bones, scattered near the base of one of the trees. Small at first, rabbits, squirrels, but then larger, something that looked human. Unnatural sounds in the night. They left the bones untouched, didn't speak about them, didn't even mention the way the forest felt different now, quieter, heavier. They went back to camp, built a fire, tried to push it from their minds. But that night, something came closer. It started small, a distant rustling in the underbrush, the snapping of twigs, not like an animal moving, but like something trying to be quiet. Then, whispers, just beyond the firelight, too faint to understand, but too close to be natural. The vanishing. They never saw it, never got a clear look. But sometime during the night, one of them, Nick, got up to use the bathroom. He never came back. They searched for him. Hours passed. No tracks, no sound, nothing but the cold, empty woods stretching in every direction. Then, Mark found something. Nick's flashlight, sitting upright, still on, but the entire ground around it untouched. No footprints leading to it, no signs of struggle, like he had simply vanished. By morning, they were in full panic. They radioed for help. Park rangers arrived, searched for days, but they never found Nick. And what's worse, they started hearing more stories, more missing people, more symbols on trees, more whispers in the night. And those who made it out, all of them said the same thing. Something was watching them. We don't go into that part of the forest anymore. Not after dark, not alone, not ever. Tentigiwang Panamarafi. The Park Service never acknowledged anything officially. They called it a tragic accident, blamed it on the terrain, on the cold, on anything but the truth. But hikers still report the carvings, still report the whispers, still report something watching from the trees. If you ever find yourself deep in Colorado's wilderness, and you hear whispers that don't belong to the wind, if you see carvings in the trees that make your skin crawl, if you hear footsteps circling your tent, do not investigate, do not answer, and above all, do not look too long, because something is looking back, and once it chooses you, it doesn't let go. Search and rescue officers see the worst of the wilderness, the lost, the injured, the ones who never make it out, and the ones who were never supposed to be found. They go into the woods knowing that some calls don't have happy endings. But for one veteran officer, his last mission wasn't just another case. It was something else. Something wrong. Something that sent him walking away from the job forever, without a word, without an explanation. And to this day, he refuses to speak of what he saw in those woods. It started like any other missing persons case. A 32-year-old woman, last seen entering the forest alone. She had planned to hike a well-marked trail, never came back. By the time the call came in, she had been missing for 2 days. The team geared up, standard search grid, standard protocol. They expected to find a body, or at least something. They started early, worked their way up the mountain. Hours passed, no signs, no footprints, no broken branches, just an unsettling quiet, like the forest itself was, waiting. And then they found it, a jacket, neatly folded, placed in the middle of the trail, as if someone had set it there deliberately. They called out for her, checked the area. Then, one of the officers, a younger recruit, stumbled into a clearing and froze, because carved into the trees, dozens of them were symbols. They spread out, scanning the clearing. That's when the lead officer, the veteran SAR officer, found it. The second item, a shoe. Not tossed, not lost, but carefully placed. At the center of the clearing. And beyond that, something else. Something worse. The recruit called out, said there was something ahead. They followed. And when they stepped beyond the tree line, they stopped. Because in the dirt, there was a perfect circle of bones. Human? Animal? They didn't know. didn't want to know, but in the center of the circle was the missing woman's backpack, the suffocating fear. The air changed, thick, heavy, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The veteran officer felt it first, that undeniable sensation, that feeling of being watched, but not from the trees, not from above, no, from below. They called for backup, told the recruit to stand still, but the kid didn't listen. He took one step toward the backpack. And that's when the radio cut out. A loud burst of static, then a voice. Not their own, not the missing woman's, something else. Leave. The veteran officer turned back immediately. Didn't ask questions, didn't wait for backup, just grabbed the recruit and ran. And when he got back to base, he handed in his resignation. Right then, right there, walked away, and never spoke about it again. They never found the missing woman, never found a body, never found anything. The backpack, gone by the time backup arrived. The bones, scattered, and the symbols on the trees, already fading, like they were never there to begin with. The veteran officer never went back, and to this day, he refuses to talk about what he saw in those woods. But every so often, when new recruits take that same trail, they say they feel it, that weight in the air, that watching feeling. And some of them? They hear the radio crackle and a voice, soft, distant, whispering just one word: leave. You've just heard 10 chilling accounts, real stories from those who walked into the unknown and barely made it back. The wilderness is vast, deep, older than we can comprehend. And sometimes things exist in the spaces we can't explain. Things that watch, things that wait, things that make people disappear without a trace. And if these stories have taught us anything, it's that not every question has an answer, not every case gets solved, and not every missing person is simply lost. But what about you? Have you ever felt that unshakable feeling? That sense that you were not alone even when no one was supposed to be there? Have you ever heard something in the dark that didn't belong? Or seen something just out of the corner of your eye, only for it to vanish before you could be sure it was ever there at all? If so, you are not alone. Drop your story in the comments below. Tell us your experience, because sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we tell. They're the ones we live. And before you go, a final word of advice. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods, if you ever hear whispers carried by the wind, if you ever wake up to strange carvings on the trees around your campsite, or if you feel the undeniable sensation of being watched, do not ignore it. Do not investigate. And whatever you do not run. Because some things out there don't hunt the way we expect. They wait, they watch, and the moment you acknowledge them, that's when they decide to follow. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories and want more, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale of the unexplained. And if you made it this far, consider this a warning, because now they know you're listening. Leave.